there's a little bit of math up front here. Not that we're going to do math, I'm just going to show the math. The math I'm talking about is how we get to a multiplier. And in the process of looking at the math and how do we get to a multiplier, I introduce the components of a model that we modify or we transform to make our multipliers. That's what I'm going to do first. First, I'm going to show the math, just to bring us all into the same territory. The second thing I'm going to do, working without a net, I'm actually going to take a model and make multipliers right before your eyes, just to show you that it is no big deal. It's not magic. It's transparent as heck. Anybody can do this. I have never had a student not be able to do it. If you took my class, it's just okay. We can do this. And then once we look at that, because the process of working through that allows me to demonstrate visually what Becca was talking about in terms of these production functions, or what I like to call a production recipe. So we're going to learn about input-output construction, just so that everybody sees how the house is built. And then what I've got is this spreadsheet that you poor people are trying to download, and it's taken a long time. Well, what I've done in this spreadsheet is taken the 500 by 500 something implan model, and I've made it a 53 by 53 model in a spreadsheet that we can work with interactively without having to learn implan. And it is a North Carolina model. It's yours to have. Don't tell implan I did this. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure it's legal, but we're just going to assume it is. Okay. You've seen this graphic before, and we start out with our model. Our model is a table of transactions. And in our table of transactions, we have industry A, B, and C across the top, columns, industry A, B, and C, and so on along the rows. The columns are buying from the rows. So industry, in this case, industry C is buying something from another industry C. So let's say this is manufacturing, and it's buying from manufacturing. That's where we start out. I'll show you what this looks like in just a second. But that's where we start out. We have this just square table of transactions. We call it a social accounts matrix. It's kind of a, as David Hughes would call it, a brain-dead social accounts matrix. But it's a social accounts matrix that we're working with. I took it out of implan. And that's what we're working with. So we start out with this square, and we have to do some math. Now, this math isn't a big deal. The reason I have to show you the math is because in processing the math, it identifies the components that I use in the spreadsheet to show you how a multiplier works. So we start out with this table of transactions. This table of transactions, then, is in a very elemental and simple step transformed into a set of what we might call direct requirements or production functions to a degree, but I'm just going to call it the regional production recipe. Regional production, what am I buying from the regional economy? And then I have a nifty little formula that operationalizes that information. So what I'm going on through here is I want to just simply demystify this. It is not a black box, it's no big deal, anybody can do this, and to include me. Okay, so we start out. Now this is matrix algebra here, but we build these components and we start out with this, and I'm going to show you what these elements are, but we start out with this equation, x something or other equals a of x plus d. And what is x plus a of x plus d? X is a matrix of the outputs in my industries. Okay, my outputs and my inputs and outputs equal one another in an input-output model, but it's a matrix of my outputs. A is that matrix of coefficients. Remember I said I produce a production recipe? So I have a matrix of coefficients. And D is final demand. Final demand is who we sell to that's outside. We sell to households, institutions, exports. When I produce a product, who am I selling it to? And it's outside of my economy, not inside my economy. So I have a matrix of final demands. And I have this I thing called an identity matrix, and I'll show it to you in just a second. So this is just the basic standard model. So we do this math. Now, we're just going to do this simple algebra. I've got this thing, and I've got to transform it into something I can operationalize. X plus x plus d. I need to get the x's on the same side. You remember this stuff from algebra? I got to get the x's over on the same side, so I've got x equals, I would have taken the x out, and I would have, if you remember your algebra, you would have had 1 minus a, but in matrix algebra, when you divide a matrix by a matrix, you get something called an identity, an identity matrix. And in matrix algebra, all an identity matrix it has ones on the diagonals and zeros everywhere else. So what I ended up when I did that in matrix math is just simply x times I minus a equals d. Okay? So that's all fine and good. And then I need to get my x by itself again. Now that I've gotten x isolated, so I divide both sides by I minus a, and I end up with x equals I minus a inverse d. X equals I minus a inverse. So I've just transformed that equation from the top down to the bottom. That's all I've done. And now I have all the parts I need to make a model. And you all understand it, right? I have all the parts. Now let's work our way through this. No, trust me. You have to trust me. I'm gonna show you this in just a second. All righty. So let's start out. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do this really quick. This is a completed one right here. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do the whole process, and then I'm going to get rid of everything below it, so because I'm a show-off. Looks like a lot of calculations, doesn't it?
Do you know that screen is black? Yeah.
We'll get it up.
Okay, sure.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that. Your job is to tell me when things like this happen, because here it comes. Okay. So the first thing I have is my table of transactions. My table of transactions in my economy. And this is the Iowa economy from about 20 years ago or 15 years ago. It's some information from a model. And you have a handout that goes with this. And the handout looks like this: exercise and input-output analysis. So if you want to follow along with me on this, it's all right here. It's all right here, and we can go through the steps. The reason I'm not going to dwell on them. These are the sectors that are in the model. I've collapsed this model. I got to put this mouse up here because it keeps going down at the bottom. Stop it. Okay. And I have everything broken down. I have ag, I have basic sectors in my economy, and it goes all the way down through government, and then I have another category at the end. Those are the inputs. Those are the things that, they're the inputs and they're the categories of producers. But those are the input categories that might go into my production recipe. And in my production recipe too, I have value-added activities. And value-added activities are payments that we make to workers, payments that proprietors receive for their management, other property income, return on investments, and then indirect business taxes. Those four things constitute value added. And for folks who like to think about these things, value added is the same thing as gross domestic product. So it's GDP. It's the worth of what's getting produced that way. And then I have households in my model, and then I have other institutions. So I'm going to build a model, and I'm going to have all of these industries, and I'm going to have all of this value added, and because I want the induced activity from household spending, I'm also going to have my households in my model, okay? And then I'm not going to pay attention to this stuff down here, because I want to make multipliers. So I'm going to be making multipliers using these sectors, the value added, and this households, the households line in my model. So let me see what I've got here. Okay, so now I want to go back to the spreadsheet, and let's see if we can see it again. And there it is. So here's, why do you do that? So here's my model. So how do I read this model? remember, everything going down is buying, everything going across is selling. So in the year that I put this thing together, agriculture, these are in millions of dollars, agriculture was buying $1.47 billion worth of inputs from agriculture. Agriculture was buying $428.5 million worth of inputs from manufacturing, right here. So you see, this shows all of the inputs that agriculture is purchasing from my regional economy from these very same industries over here. So I have my table of transactions here. And the sum of these inputs, these requirements, down below, in this case agriculture is 11.7 billion, equals the sum of the sales that agriculture makes, go all the way to the right, dun da da da, 11.7 billion. Inputs equal outputs. In my model, I have a square matrix. Okay? So that's where we start out. Next, I have to create, according to my formula, I need an A. Remember, I needed an A. Things I need. I minus A, I need an A. So I'm going to make my A matrix. So let me copy this. I'm going to copy this down. I'm going to copy this down, and what I want to go all the way to households, and I'm going to copy it over all the way to households eventually. There we go. And I'm going to Control C, and I'm going to copy this over right here. We leave the bottom stuff there. We're not doing any multipliers on the other stuff. Control V. What I want to do now is I want to make the A matrix. We'll label it A matrix. I'm sorry I'm having trouble with my mouse, but. And to get my A matrix, what I want to know is what fraction of input comes from every one of those industries. So all I'm having to do is divide the cell items up above by the column total. That's all I'm doing here. So we'll do this right here. I'm going to say, it says I want to know what fraction of all inputs are coming from agriculture here. And so I'm going to put a $ in front of that so I can copy that formula and stop it. I copied it. I'm going to copy this all the way over and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so now I've got my table of accounts. So now instead of saying agriculture is getting X amount of inputs from agriculture, what I now have is a column that says for every $1 worth of input requirements or output of agriculture, for every $1 worth of total inputs, agriculture had to buy 12.5 cents worth of agricultural products. It had to buy 3 cents worth of wholesale goods. It had to buy 3.7 cents worth of manufactured goods. For every $1 of production in agriculture, it needed 4.4 cents worth of real estate. It's making rent payments. And you can see all of those categories all the way down to, for every $1 worth of output, it made 4.1 cents worth of employee compensation, 15 cents payments to the farmer. So you see what my production recipe, to make $1 worth of agricultural product, this is my production recipe. It can be in percentages or decimals. And that's what we have here. Manufacturing is the same way. Manufacturing in Iowa, it bought 7.8 cents worth of, all manufacturing bought 7.8 cents worth of agricultural goods, but manufacturing also bought 7.9 cents worth of manufactured goods. So I've got this cross-manufacturing relationship. Manufacturing pays a heck of a lot more to employees, 18, almost 19 cents per $1 worth of output, compared to ag over there with 4, and so on. So you see what's going on. I have my production recipe. Now what else do I need to put in there? I need another matrix. What was my next matrix? X equals, well, I don't want to put D in. What else? I got to have an I matrix. What is I? So we're going to make an I matrix here. I'll copy this down. We're going to make an I matrix called the identity, which just happened because we divided one matrix by another, and instead of getting 1 as you get in regular algebra, we get what's called the identity matrix. Control V. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put zeros everywhere because I'm copying this formula down. I'm going to put a 0 here, hit enter, and then I'm going to, if you're old enough, it's not enter, it's return. I used to run labs for my students. I'd say, hit return. What the hell is return? Kids don't know what return means. Okay, so what's distinctive about my identity matrix? It has 1s on the diagonals, right? I can do this with a formula, but it's more fun to do it this way. 1, duh. Did I miss one? Yeah. Oh, geez, Louise. I did that on purpose. Here we go. 1. It's the mouse's fault. I don't do this when there's 530 rows. I use a formula. There, I did it. So I have an I matrix. So now what does that equation say I have to do with I and the A? I have to I minus A. I minus A. So let me copy this down. So I need to do I minus A, and I have to label it, enter, and this is the I minus A matrix. I minus A matrix. And all the I minus A matrix is, folks, is I simply subtract the value in I up above, the value in A up above from I. So I minus, go all the way up, the A value. So when I do this, I'm going to have positive values on the diagonal and negative values, of course, on the non-diagonals. And I'm going to copy this over. Okay, so you see what's going on now. I'm transforming that formula. And I've started out simply with that table of direct transactions. I converted it into a statement, a production recipe. I introduced the I matrix. I'm now calculating the I minus A. And, dear folks, we're going to do the I minus A inverse. Now, back in the olden days, without a net, you watch. Back in the olden days, Excel wouldn't invert matrices that were very big, so we had to use other methods, and none of which were, it's not possible to do this by hand, at least not in my brain, but we can do these in here. So I'm going to copy this data down here, and I'm going to make the I minus A inverse matrix, and when I get done with that, I will have my multipliers. So let's do this. So we're going to, this is a little bit different. You highlight the entire area where you're going to put the formula in. Go all the way over. All the way over. And then you write your formula, equals. And we're going to invert. So it's called minverse. And we're inverting the I minus A up above. So I'm going to go up and grab that. I'm going to invert this entire matrix up above. And if you've never done matrix formulas in Excel, you have to use the sequence Control-Shift-Enter to enter the formula. So Control-Shift-Enter, did it work? It did. It did. So what do I have here? This is now called the table of total requirements. Dun, da, da, da. I have the table of total requirements, and what I get, we can calculate this, but what it says is that per dollar's worth of output, for example, in agriculture, here's my dollar, it needs another 15.1 cents worth of agricultural inputs, one way or the other, considering the supply chain plus household spending, because I have both things going on in here, the indirect and the induced. I'm calculating both at the same time. For every dollar's worth, there's 6 cents worth of spending in wholesale. For every dollar's worth of agricultural output, there's 4.3 cents worth of manufacturing goods. In the total economy now, considering the supply chain and household spending, for every dollar's worth of spending in output in the ag sector, there's 7 cents worth of real estate transactions. Now I don't just have farmers renting land, I have households renting houses. I have businesses renting space. I have all of these things put together. So if we sum all of those up, we get our total multiplier. So my total multiplier here is going to be, we'll do this, it's total output multiplier. I'm going to sum everything. I use a plus sign to sum, even though you were all taught to use an equal sign, and that's just a function of my age. Used to be, we used a plus sign. It's the same thing. So my total multiplier, output multiplier for agriculture is 1.72. Now this is an aggregated model. A disaggregated model would probably produce a lower multiplier, but so it's 1.72. For every dollar's worth of agricultural output in my economy, there's 71.2 cents worth of other economic activity that's occurring in my economy. $1 worth of agriculture plus everything else equals 1.712. Okay? Or for every dollar's worth of output change in my ag sector, there's $1.71.2 cents worth of total change in my economy. You can add it together that way. Two ways to talk about it. So I could copy this multiplier across and we could compare sector multipliers. And so we had the multiplier for manufacturing is 1.703. My multiplier for transportation is 1.76. My multiplier for information services is 1.631. You get the idea. There's a variation in multipliers, and not one of them is 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, which out in the country they like to say there's a multiplier of 7. They do, because they know that. Well, it's not. It's not. And we can sum all these other elements up as well. We can get a value-added multiplier. That's not how you spell value. And that's just going to be all of the elements of value added. So let me do that. And we'll talk about that in a second. So here's employee count. We don't go down to households. We just get the elements of value added. And stop it. So what is this telling me? It says, for every dollar's worth of output change in the ag sector, there was 73 cents worth of value added or GDP generated in my entire economy. For every dollar's worth of change in, which one of it is manufacturing? Is it this one? Probably. I could look, couldn't I? Should be higher. Yeah. In manufacturing, there's 66.4 cents worth of value added generated in my economy. Or each one of these is a multiplier as well. There's the employee compensation multiplier. For every dollar's worth of output in agriculture, there's 21 cents worth of employee compensation. So it's a multiplier. Okay? So these are our multipliers that we use in our model. We have output, we have value added and the elements of value added. And what we don't have in them is jobs. We add jobs to the model later on. The models, the input-output models, are first built with economic information, output, input, elements of value added, relationships among industries within a region, and then we use just basic fixed factors to allocate the jobs and get job impacts. And so that's what I've done in my other model. So does everybody see how easy this is? So, does everybody have my model now loaded? Dave's pretty good North Carolina model. Let's go to it.
Does everyone have it? I have a thumb drive if people don't have it on there. Well, because it's this piece, he's going to take a...
We'll take it slow. We'll take it slow. Everything that I just did is in the tab labeled Leontief transformation in this model. And what this is this is the 2014 North Carolina IMPLAN statewide input-output model. I aggregated that model. It has over 400 sectors in your economy, and I collapsed it down to 53 by 53. 53 by 53. And then I did exactly, I'm going to the Leontief transformation. Everything that I just did on the screen is right here in this model. I have this table of transactions, these direct transactions. I created a table and a matrix. I made an identity matrix. I calculated the I minus A. I inverted the I minus A. And as a consequence, I got a set of multipliers for your statewide economy. That's all it is. I know, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And so we have all of these multipliers for your economy, and then to this now I've added the jobs. So I've piggybacked it in there and added the jobs. So does everybody see that what you have is what I did, and if you want to do what I did, look at the handout, look at what I did here. You can do it yourself just for practice at break. Okay, that's it. That's all we care about now is, are you happy that I built a model? Okay, now what you should also be happy is where it says enter impacts here. Because you don't have to learn anything about IMPLAN to do this. Go ahead.
Can you give the total requirements multiplied for ag is 1.8. For every dollar, there's 1.8 impact.
Yeah, that's right. For every dollar's worth of output in agriculture, let me find it. I got to go down to the bottom here. For every dollar's worth of output in agriculture, for every dollar's worth of output agricultural sales, there's 80.4 cents worth of other transactions that are going on in the economy. $1 worth of agricultural sales plus 80.4 cents worth of other transactions that are going to represent their input requirements as well as household spending. Your value-added multiplier says for every dollar's worth for every dollar's worth of transactions in your economy, there's 93 cents worth of additions to value added in your whole economy, to the farmer, to the suppliers, and to people supplying household goods. Okay? So that's what that multiplier means. I'm using the multiplier that way. Per dollar's worth of activity in your economy, how much of it translates into total economic activity, and a subset of which is value added.
So income then is there's for every dollar of activity for property income issues, there's 55 cents.
Yeah, now that property income is going to be payments for the entire economy, that's going to be payments for dividends, interest, and rents. So it's going to be payments to investors. Some of that might not stay in my economy because you might have external investors. It's going to be paying stockholders, that kind of stuff. Those are the elements of value added. Employee compensation is workers. Proprietor income is the owners of a business. We usually add employee compensation plus proprietor income, and I reduce those and call those labor income. Income from working, or in the old-fashioned way, we call it earnings. And everything else, returns on investment, those are called unearned income. I love doing that to bankers.
And maybe we should just make sure everyone's clear. You can't add up these multipliers, right? So these are they're different kinds of multipliers. And what you're going to use to tell your community story has to do with what your community's goals are.
Right.
Right? So maybe it's just worth reading what's in value added again so people are
Yeah.
clear about that.
The value-added multiplier is the sum of these individual elements. Employee compensation, proprietor income, other property income, which is also called returns to investments, and indirect tax payments, which are the taxes that are associated with production. Excise, sales taxes, property taxes, taxes associated with production. You sum those three things up and you get value added. Okay. But you don't add this multiplier and this multiplier. That's a no-no. That's a no-no. Okay. Let's go to the model. And we're going to go to the model, and we're going to go where it says enter impacts here. Now, the first thing I want to do here, folks, I'm going to bring a spreadsheet up. I'm not going to show you how to enter things into this. The first thing I want to point out is we're either going to enter a job value or an output change, and my output changes, my units are millions. So you're going to have to think in terms of decimals occasionally. So we'll just make sure that we do that. All of our activities, though, we're going to do right now, we're just going to do on the left column. We're not going to do anything on the right column. I want you to go down in your model, and I want you to go down to construction, because I want to replicate what might happen if we had stimulus spending by that evil federal government to bankrupt the United States. And I want you to put in 100 to represent $100 million worth of construction stimulus. Put it right here where it says construction, right here, right there, $100 million. Now I want you to next go over, I'm going to do it too so we can demonstrate this. I'll put 100. 100 represents 100 million, hit enter. Oh, don't look at those numbers that are at the top. Go to the model results. It's the next tab over. No, you put it in here. Here, show me, I'll show you again. You put 100 right here. And then I have it reporting the results in the tab called Model Results, okay? So we go to Model Results as soon as this behaves. So I put, okay, is everybody with me now?
And if anyone has any questions, Rebecca and I are going around, so just raise your hand and we can also come over.
We put 100 and then enter?
You just put 100 in and enter under construction.
Or return.
Or return. and then return the carriage like that. Oing. Okay, so I want you to read this table. Whoop, got a problem.
So from the website, has anybody else downloaded it directly from the website? Are the cells protected? Yeah, they are.
No, the cells shouldn't be protected in that column.
I didn't protect it though.
Oh, okay, I apologize if they are. They're protected in those two. Huh?
The jump drive, they're not, but
Okay, so folks, here's what you're going to do.
she got on. Okay. You just have to click enable editing. Yeah, enable editing.
Excuse me for doing that, but if you click on review and then unprotect sheet, it'll unprotect the whole sheet. I'm sorry if I did that. Are we ready to go? Okay, so I did the 100. Now we're going to look at the model results, and we're going to learn about these model results here. We're going to talk about them for a second. So my direct shock that Becca was talking about is the flow of federal money from the outside into the regional economy that wasn't here before. So I've got this shock of money coming in. That shock of money was $100 million. Out of that shock of money, the model tells me that 26.2 million of that money was spent for labor income to workers and proprietors. Which is a subset of value added, so we get value added. But we're not going to talk about value added. We're just going to talk about $100 million, 27 million, 26.2 million found its way into direct payments to workers, so that's going to be in the construction field, to 612 job holders. When the construction industry got boosted by $100 million, it required or created a demand for an additional $87.2 million worth of inputs into the regional economy, as well as induced activity. I've collapsed them both together here. I've put them both together. So I have both supply sector and household demand collapsed under this column. Because of this expansion in this secondary activity, I needed 600 and almost 60 more job holders. in the North Carolina economy, making another $27.9 million, almost $28 million worth of labor income. I add the direct plus the indirect plus the induced, and I get the total economic impact of that $100 million worth of activity. Your economy then is $187 million larger in terms of output with a multiplier of 1.87. I'll talk about these multipliers in just a second. Value added grew by $84 million, a subset of which is labor income by $54 million. The federal government puts in 100, you get some roads and infrastructure, and along the way, $54 million gets generated in labor income to 1,271 job holders. 1,271. This is exactly how in-plan works, except it's clunkier and longer and you can make more mistakes. Okay? So we have multipliers. Well, here's the multipliers that come out of the model. Here's the multipliers that come out of the model. And then we have a different way to talk about multipliers. There's many different ways we can talk about multipliers, but we have what we call type 2 or type total multipliers. And they're simply the total value divided by the direct value. And so, for example, in this case, even though the output multiplier is 1.87, we have multipliers over 2 for value added, labor income, and jobs. For every job that was stimulated in the construction sector, there was 1.08 other jobs in the rest of the economy supported as a consequence. So you see why this stimulus spending has this desire to be countercyclical, because it has this job creation effect. Job creation. And then these are the average values. Now, if we look below on the model, we'll roll it down. I've summarized these by the categories that we have, and you can see where the job impacts are. You can see up on top, output, value added, labor, income, and jobs. It reconciles with the totals that I had in the whole thing. And then you can see where the activity accumulates. Here it is, 612.6 jobs in construction. 147 are showing, stop it. 147 are, you're just being bad. 147 are showing up in retail, but that's mostly because of household spending. The workers are spending their money, not because the construction workers or construction companies are buying retail goods. 667 in business services. There should be a bunch of it in dining and drinking. Yeah, 47. That's what we do. We dine and drink. Okay, so you see how I've allocated those impacts across all of the categories that were in my model. So we've now calculated an economic impact of a stimulus program for the state of North Carolina, and if anybody wants to interview you tomorrow, you can say, I've got the model results. This is what it's worth to my economy. What is it? Totals, 1,271 jobs per 100 million worth of spending. Give me some more money. Okay? And if for some reason something's happening to your economy in several categories of spending as a result of some sort of state government activity, you could put minus signs in front of those numbers and calculate the economic impacts of those. You could do that if you wanted. Okay, let's go back to the inner impacts here, folks, and we're going to delete that 100. You got to get rid of it to make everything go down to 0. And let's go to my PowerPoint. The first thing I want you to do is we want to compare two different outcomes. And in this case, it's exactly what Becca was talking about. Grains and oilseeds, I've got collapsed into one sector, and I've got fruits and vegetables. Again, this is a state model. So what I want you to do is I want you to go into the model where you enter the results, and I want you to put a 10 in grains and oilseeds. So put a 10 in there, hit enter or return, and then let's look at the results. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to try to, now it's not letting me do what I want to do. Okay, we're going to close this. I'll put 10, so you have it in? Okay. Put 10, it's the first one, folks. It's the very first, I'm trying to make this easy. Agriculture is on top, okay?
Woo!
Okay, now let's go to food. We're going to go to model results. And what we want to look at, only thing we're going to look at is for every $10 million worth of output in grain and oilseed farming in your state, the model says it supports just slightly fewer than 19 jobs on the farm. And this is the labor income. And once it all multiplies through, it's got a huge multiplier because that's the nature of production agriculture. We have 75 jobs. So all I want you to remember is 75 jobs and $3.8 million worth of total labor income. Now I want you to go back and take that 10 out and put it in vegetables and melons and see if the numbers go up. So go back, take that 10 out of oilseed, put a 10 in vegetables and melon, enter, look at the model results. You see the number goes up. You need more labor at the farm level. You're paying more income, both to workers and to proprietors at the farm level. Once everything multiplies through, you have more jobs, more labor income. I focus on jobs and labor income mostly, folks. This is what you and I have, and this is what we make when we have these jobs. Value added gets esoteric, but what we pay attention to is jobs and labor income. So you got how this is working now. So right now I can differentiate among sectors. And by the way, I do have the implant sector loaded up, and you asked the question about fruits and vegetables and tobacco. I put $1 million worth of, what's the multiplier for $1 million worth of fruits and vegetables and $1 million worth of tobacco? And I'll show you later. I'll show you later if we get time, if I don't rattle on here. Is everybody?
You know what we didn't tell them yet?
Yeah.
What a job means.
Okay, a job is not a full-time equivalent. A job is a job. I work at Iowa State University, the University of Iowa, and I also consult. I count for 3 jobs in the world. The world counts me as 3 jobs. So in agriculture, it's going to be the conventional job associated with agriculture in your industry. It's different in California than a conventional ag job. So it's what is the typical agricultural job in your region. So we annualize, they don't full-time equivalent, they annualize that job. What is the typical annualized value of that labor? And so if somebody typically works only 30 hours a week and 25 hours a year, that becomes the annualized value of that industry. Versus manufacturing, where it's mostly full-time and a little bit of cyclicality, and maybe the average over the course of a year is 38 weeks, that becomes their annualized value. Working in dining and drinking as a server, the annualized value is whatever the average is over the course of a year for the average worker. So jobs don't mean full-time equivalencies, they just mean persons that have a position. That's it. So. Yeah, I didn't say that, the model said that. So, okay, so let's look at that. It's showing 81,000 showing up at the farm level. Most of that is accumulating to the proprietor. Remember, I have the proprietor. This is another thing Becca talked about. This is based on your average production for your fruits and your vegetable and melon sector. Probably it's weighted by your commercial operations. So it's going to not reflect local foods, it's going to reflect that sector of your average statewide industry. So that's why that weighted average is much higher. The secondary impacts are much lower. They're probably less than the average for all workers in your state. So it's a good point though. It's a good point. Okay, let's do some exercises here then, folks. And we're going to do exactly what we talked about. I don't think I need to do it with you. You can, huh? Oh, you have a, yeah.
So I was given that, is there any way to calculate, do they calculate median along with median?
No, there is no median in here. It's all based on Okay, so the model is a set of fixed coefficients that all are based on the average. So I don't get distributions low and high, I don't get a median compared to a mean, I get the entire economy, whatever my region is, averaged. They don't know, that's not how the model gets calculated. But yeah, but no.
Just add to that.
Yeah.
So hopefully what I'm hoping you guys are starting to see here, and especially, even if you didn't get exactly how Dave was calculating things initially when he went through and did it, the key piece is to see that each industry has that.
Do you have my handout?
Or production functions, right? You have
Let me just look at it. No, I'll skip it.
why, as we talked about
Yeah, that one.
this morning,
Thank you.
that local and regional food system activity is different and not necessarily represented by that production function, right?
Right.
The main thing is labor, starting off with labor. That we think there's more labor required per unit of expenditure, right? So what we're trying to say here is we want you to understand how to do this impact system, how it's calculated, or even if you don't understand how to do it, you understand sort of conceptually how one would calculate it. But we want to understand why you might want additional information to add to this kind of model. Is that okay, Dave?
Right. This is the off-the-shelf default model. I haven't modified it for anything. It is not a local foods model. It's just simply a statewide model, and we have to live with its ugly warts as they reveal themselves. And then if you want to get better at this, you learn how to do in-plan, you learn how to modify these production functions, you get information on your sectors, and then you make that sector reflect that subset of the economy you're trying to study. Well, that's chapter 7 in the book, and that's hard. It's not that hard, but it's hard enough because you got to do it. You got to do it. Let's do something else here. I want you to get rid of that $10 million in fruits and vegetables and melons. And I want you to go down and put $10 million only in one of these categories. I want you to put it in the, is it meat processing sector? Meat and poultry processing. I want you to put $10 million into meat and poultry processing. I'll do it too. I'll do it too. It's better if I show you. So I'm going to do it. Food, meat and poultry processing. I'm going to put 10 in. Okay, now we're going to go again. We're going to look at the model results. We're going to look at the model results. So this has to do with gravity pulling my mouse down. It's terrible when gravity pulls your mouse down. We have 10 million. So we have $10 million worth of output in the poultry sector. We have 26 jobs that are created, poultry processing or meat processing sector. It only creates 26 jobs. It multiplies through on the input side and on the induced side, and we get a total number of 74 jobs, a good, nice, healthy income and jobs multiplier. What's wrong with that? Nothing intrinsically, but there is something wrong with that. I added a new plant. Did it create more meat production in my economy or not? Or did the plant come because I had excess meat animal supply? So when we do these things, sometimes we have to look at the ag sector and say, oh my, it's really boosting my ag sector. Well, in this case, it's not. Here, we have ag animals and poultry. So did it create more? I'm just going to, it's like a turtle, it's on its back. It created these new jobs in ag and poultry sector. Sometimes we're not creating new jobs upstream. We're actually capitalizing on jobs that are already there. And so sometimes we have to pay attention to that. The reason this is important for me is we have ethanol plants in Iowa. You might have heard about them. We have 43 of them. 43 ethanol plants. They put the ethanol plant numbers into the model, and voila, they created corn farmers. As a matter of fact, almost all the jobs are coming from corn farmers and the corn farmers' multipliers. Well, the corn farmers were already there, folks. But they took those great big honking numbers to Congress and they said, look at what we can do to the regional economy. So you have to take them out. You see what I'm getting at here? Sometimes the ethanol plant did nothing but add value to corn that was already here. So we start our impact calculation from the point at which the corn arrives at the plant, not going back upstream and growing corn that's already there. That's all. It's just a nicety. It's a way to think about things. But I want folks to understand that we have to net it out, not just in terms of opportunity costs, but in terms of how much net new productivity we're adding to our regional economy.
But in a case like the corn, I mean, wouldn't it also potentially attract people, corn producers?
No, our land was already in production. There's not a bushel full of land that wasn't being already farmed.
All right, but hypothetically, in another step, if you have a new processor.
Yeah, but why would you put a processor if you didn't have an already efficient supply of corn there? You see, it's a chicken and egg problem we have. We have to be careful. I mean, this was a great example. You're not going to get an ethanol plant, just trust me. But you don't grow enough corn. But we have to do the same thing with cellulosic ethanol. If that's a possibility, we are bringing productivity up that we don't have. We're maybe taking fallow land, pasture land, or other kinds of land, and putting it into production in a way that it currently hasn't been put into production. And we have new agricultural upstream inputs, and I count them. So it depends on what we're doing. I don't want to get too complicated here. I just wanted to work through that example.
In the North Carolina example, we just legalized industrial hemp, so we would be looking at putting in hemp processing facilities without yet having any.
Right, and well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But what I would recommend that you do, if it's a new industry, you first describe the hemp industry's impact, hemp production. And then you don't let the hemp manufacturing plant link back up to agriculture, and you add its values up, and then you add the two together to make sure you're measuring them separately. Here's the ag part, here's the processing part, and I didn't double count when I did it. Okay, here's what I want you to do next here. I want you to go back to the model, and what we're going to do here is it's what's called an economic contribution. This is a little bit of a crude way to do it, but what we're going to say is how big is the fruit and vegetable sector in North Carolina? So under the vegetable and melon farming, I want you to enter in the value I have there, 605.4, because that's what the model says output is in that combined sector for vegetable and melon farming. And then let's add another one. Down in the fruit it's reverse of that. It's 605.4 in 605.4 in vegetable and melon and 143.7 in fruit. 143.7 in fruit. Okay, we're going to go to the model results. There's a little bit of overcounting here, but we don't care about that. We don't care about it. It's just a little teensy bit. So what we're doing here is what we would call a conventional economic contribution analysis, or another thing they say, this is your footprint, your economic footprint of this industry combined. Those two sectors combined support directly in the regional economy 4,800 jobs, pay $332 million worth of labor income. When it multiplies all the way through the economy, it supports 8,500 jobs, nearly $500 million worth of labor income. If you wanted to make a statement about the size of fruits and vegetable production in your state economy, these are using 2014 numbers, this would be a valid result. It's not the economic impact per se, it's the economic contribution. What's the worth of this to the regional economy as a subset of everything else that's going on? Subset of everything else. So we call that the economic contribution. That was easy. Look at all the things that you're getting for hardly nothing. Okay, let's do a couple of other things here. Bad mouse. let's go back and get rid of those numbers. We're going to talk about what I did with the Upper Midwest study. Oh no, we're going to differentiate. We're going to do opportunity costs here. Yes, no, yeah, we're going to take the numbers from the Upper Midwest study, and I'm going to pretend I applied them to North Carolina. It's on your sheet. Remember, Becca talked about we have this zero-sum game up in the Midwest. If I'm adding acres of fruit and vegetable production, and that acreage is intending to satisfy more local demand, like import substitution, then we give that a classification as an economic impact because I'm producing regionally something I used to import. And now I have money that's being spent within my regional economy and multiplies through the linkages that she talked about, versus something that was being purchased from Washington State or Michigan or California or Florida. What's the probability of that dollar coming back to North Carolina? Really low, isn't it? And so we're differentiating these two things. But I have to net out what happens if I take away agricultural land out of production. Now, when I did that study, I was able to say I needed 75,192 acres worth of fruits and vegetable production to satisfy the demand of 37 million people. So that's how many acres I needed. And so I'm using the numbers from that Upper Midwest study. So what we need to do is we need to add the numbers in the right-hand column. We need to add $170 million worth of new fruit, vegetable, and melon production in the North Carolina economy. So let's add 170 point nothing, 170, enter. And then what do we have to add for fruit farming? 77. So that's going to give us the total value of these acres in fruits and vegetable production. But I had to take that farmland away from conventional agriculture. In the Midwest, it's corn and soybeans. So I'm going to take it away from the grain and oilseed sector. And from the grain and oilseed sector, I'm going to take away, I'm going to put in a minus 118. So go back up to ag, oilseed, and grain crops and add a minus 118. And now let's go to the results. And if you get the results like I do, we get a nice, good, big positive value. But what we've done is net it out. This is the net gain versus the gross gain. And I've added my fruits and vegetable production less my ag, my grain and oilseed sector. And so I'm producing my net regional gain. And again, we already saw that in the first exercise or the second exercise. The fruits and vegetables sector, the vegetable sector, they produce more value per acre of production. So we end up with a nice gain in my regional economy. You could have gone with the big number, but you would have been denying the fact that you were removing land for production. You had an opportunity cost, and regardless of what people say, I do like corn and oilseed producers, and I think we need to count their numbers. I have to count them. I can't just ignore them. So we've been through everything here. We've done an economic contribution. We've done an offset here. Let's do a last one. This one's a little bit more complicated, and we're going to, yeah.
So if you go down to that bottom part and you scroll down, you can see exactly who gained and who lost.
You're right.
That's one of the powerful things about this tool that Dave has created.
So
Tell each industry which ones are negative and which ones are positive.
total of 221 jobs lost in the ag and oilseed once everything multiplied through, compared to the addition of jobs in the fruit and vegetable production, and then all of the other sectors, negative and positive, that were affected as a consequence of that shift.
That like you took away the food from the cows and the swine, and is that why those are negative?
Yeah, the reason these are negative is because if we reduce this, then what it's doing is saying I'm going to feed less beef.
Okay,
Yep, that's what it's going to say. And that's one of those things where, no, we're not going to feed fewer beef, but But that's what the model said. That's what the model said. And we're just going to work the math through that way. That's exactly right.
Your connection to acreage then is?
The reason I did that is I calculated how many acres in the upper Midwest would have been required to produce a bundle of fruits and vegetables for seasonal supply for 37 million people. So that's what that acreage value was. And then it's 2010 numbers. That value was in 2010 numbers when I did that study. So I'm just putting those numbers here for make-believe, just to show you the example. Your numbers would be different. Your land productivity is actually going to be lower than the upper Midwest because our fertility is way high and our topsoil is this thick and we get weekly rains and we don't have pests that are that big. Okay, let's do a food hub.